Hello, today I want to talk about what you need to build a UK-based survival pouch. Now, anyone who's studied survival will be expecting to see things like a ferro rod, perhaps snares to catch small animals or fishing hooks in line. But you've got to consider that the UK is actually a very benign environment and you have to think about the context. In England and Wales, we're never further than 3 miles from a road, and even the wildest part of the Scottish Cairngorms, we're never actually further than 6 miles from a road. Now, our temperature very rarely drops below zero, and even in the height of summer, it really gets below 32 degrees, or sorry, above 32 degrees. Although that is changing a little bit with the sort of changing weather patterns. Our biggest predator is actually the badger, which is not very big at all, and we don't have volcanoes or mudslides and things like that, so it's a very kind of safe environment. That said, there are some challenges that we need to think about. So what are the problems we're likely to face in the UK? Well, if you study after action reports from mountain rescue teams, one of the biggest causes of incident is actually a slip or a trip. And in most cases, 65% in fact, that's due to an injury to the ankle or the lower leg. So knowing that, we can fine tune what we need to think about. The other big thing that you have from those incident reports are medical issues, so things like someone has an asthma attack or perhaps even a heart attack, some sort of underlying medical problem. And finally, it's navigation errors. So basically just people getting lost and not being able to find their way back. So fine-tuning our survival strategies, to that context, the biggest thing we should be looking to do is try and find help. And in the UK, that's relatively easy because there are so many people here that it's very hard to get away from them. I've actually come out into the woods trying not to see anybody, and there's people all around me. It's very, very hard to kind of not see them. And even when you go somewhere very remote, like somewhere like the Lake District or Cairngorms, you will still bump into people. And if you can call people over a distance, you're going to be able to find help. You may need to go a few hours without help, but there'll always be help there, within a day or two. So what we're talking about really is a short-term scenario. We don't have to plan for those long-term, surviving off your wits, living off the land, catching deer and all that kind of thing. Because in the UK, it's not really a factor, it doesn't happen. The other thing we need to think about though, it is important, is think about exposure to the elements. Now, it is possible that you could succumb to the elements before you get help. So we do need to think about things like our clothing system and keeping warm, and that is definitely going to be a factor and something we need to think about. And the other context to think about is this is just a survival pouch and is designed to be used with other more basic equipment. Now, I'll read off from a list because I don't want to miss anything and leave you without something if you're using me to plan. So the first one is a water bottle, for obvious reasons, you need to drink. I'd always carry a spare meal as well, just in case you're out for longer than you intended to be. Maybe you get lost, for example, or you're just enjoying yourself and don't get back when you plan to be. You want a 3-layer clothing system, so that would be a base layer, a mid layer and a shell. I'll go through that in a separate video. A first aid kit is really essential because, as we said, a lot of the incidents are due to sort of slips and trips and medical issues, so having a first aid kit is a really good idea. A survival bag, which is kind of a large thick plastic bag that will give you some protection from the elements if you happen to get caught out and you need to overnight unexpectedly. It's not a comfortable night, but it is survivable. I'd also have a phone for signalling because obviously getting means of help is really good, and a phone is a fantastic way of doing that, and we get signalled in most places in the UK now. I'd also have a main torch, so a big torch in case you're out longer than you anticipated, and I would have a compass and a map. Don't just rely on your GPS on your phone because obviously your batteries can wear out, and it's definitely worth learning map and compass skills because that is the best and safest way to navigate. And finally, sun cream, hat and gloves dependent on the weather. So let's get into the survival pouch itself. Now, the first thing is I'd recommend you buy yourself a pouch and not just buy all the items because they will kind of roll around in the bottom of your rucksack and they'll get lost, or you have to sort of find them individually before you pack and leave for home. So keep them all together is a really nice way of just sort of managing that. Second thing is get one that is small enough that you're not going to, it's not going to be too big that you're going to kind of leave at home. It's got to be kind of hand size that you can just kind of easily grab, stick at the bottom of your bag and not worry about the weight. Okay, so let's open this and see what's in here. Okay, now the first thing in here is a bike light, okay? Bike light with freshly charged batteries. Now the reason for this is we said, we're never further than 3 miles from a road in England and Wales and 6 in Scotland. But lots of people do die on the road, so there's a lot more injuries from things like people, cars colliding with a pedestrian on a dark road than there is around things like exposure and sort of people starving to death in the wild, because that doesn't happen. So actually this is a survival tool because you can clip this to your rucksack, gives you a nice little light, and then car drivers will see you. You can use them to flag car drivers down if you need to as well, but most importantly it'll stop you getting run over, which is really important. Now, this also has use if you're with other people, because if you need to leave somebody behind, if they're injured, for example, you've got to go for help, you could leave this attached to them so you can find them again in the dark, or even with your dog, like I quite often am with my dogs. I can attach this to the dog if I've got to go back for them with some help. I can help find them in the dark as well. So that's why I've got a bike light, and you can use like a silum stick as well, but actually this is much brighter, it lasts a lot longer, and you can switch it on and off. It's a lot easier to use, so bike light over a silum stick, I would say. Speaking of lights, the other thing I have in here is a backup torch. Now this is just a small mini torch. It's not particularly bright, but it's bright enough that I can see by at night, especially if it's very dark. This would definitely give me enough light to either navigate by if I had to, or alternatively to kind of signal help or stop a car from actually hitting me. And the reason for that is, your main torch could break, so I have a little backup here, and light is so important at night because it stops those kind of slips and trips if you're kind of bumming around the bushes at night, stop you falling over a rock, etc. So it's worth having. Connected to that as well, I also keep a spare battery for my main torch. So I use these kind of I think it's called 18655 batteries. They're basically lithium-ion batteries for a really bright LED torch. So I just have a spare battery. It's worth having. And it's in a nice little rubber case, so it doesn't kind of short circuit in the bag. It's quite a good idea. Now, another thing I've got in here is a whistle. Now, a whistle is a great idea. This one is a proper sort of mountain distress whistle. And these things are really good. They're actually effective to about 800 metres, so just about 0.8 kilometres, which is quite a fair way. It's further than you can shout for help anyway. And the way to use this, if you do 3 blasts, 3 short blasts followed by a minute silence, that's actually recognised as a mountain distress signal. And anyone who is experienced should recognise that and either come and find you to give you help, or alternatively phone on and pass on details to the kind of mountain rescue or lowland rescue teams so they can come and find you. Now, attached to the other end of the lanyard, I have a small compass. Now that is just a kind of really kind of basic compass. It's not like a silver or anything, because this is my backup compass. It's not my main compass, but I can use that to kind of find out where north is. If I couldn't see by the light, etc., it was at night time, I couldn't see the pole star, then I could use that as well. So that's what that's for. Okay, also in here I have my most expensive item, and this is actually a prepaid debit card. Now I carry this because if I get to a road, for example, after I've been lost, I may have lost my wallet, and I've got a means to pay for a taxi or get a train or a bus home, rather than have to kind of walk back miles and miles if I'm injured. So actually it's a really good idea to have, and because it's a prepaid debit card, it's not my main card. That can just live in my pouch permanently, not a problem. And just stick 30-40 quid on there, just enough to get you home basically. Wrapped around that prepaid debit card, I've actually got some duct tape. Now, duct tape is really, really good, because if for example, my sole was coming away from my boot, I could temporarily keep it on there and sort of fix my footwear, which, footwear is a big thing when you're out and about in the wilderness. Also, if I had a tear in my waterproof jacket, I could repair it with this. Perhaps a tear in my rainfly in my tent, again, I could repair it with this duct tape. So having a bit of duct tape, you don't want to carry a whole roll around, but actually just wrapping 3 or 4 meters around a card like that, it's a great way of getting access to duct tape if you need it, and it takes up no room at all. It's really quite small and thin, so that's worth having. Okay, another item related to repairs is I would have in my kit, I would have a pair of spare laces. Now, it's a bit of a weird one, people don't think about this, but if your lace on your boot goes, it's actually a real problem, because it makes it very, very difficult to walk, and your footwear is actually very protective, especially as we said earlier on with mountain rescue. 65% of all injuries are due to the ankle or the lower leg, and it's usually through incorrect footwear. So not having boots with proper laces will be a problem. So spare pair of laces, weighs next to nothing, very cheap, definitely worth carrying with you. Okay, also connected to fixing things is I have some, this is basically like paracord, but it's the small kind of nanocord rather than the kind of 550. It's a kind of a thinner cord. It's strong enough to fix most things, and because it's quite thin, I can actually carry lots of this in a very small package. So I have a good kind of 30 feet of that here. Now, I use this for all sorts. For example, if I'm with my dogs, perhaps a lead could break, I could use this as a temporary lead if I needed to. It wouldn't be the most comfortable thing to hold, but it would do the job. I could also use things like fix a strap if I needed to, and all sorts of basic repairs. So a little bit of way to make repairs is good, combined with the duct tape, I could probably solve most problems that I need to temporarily in the wild. Okay, other things I have in here are some water purification tablets. Now these are by Oasis. These are the same ones you get in military ration packs, and you can get these online. They're really cheap, and each one of these tablets will purify kind of 1 litre of water. So you put this in your bottle, you leave it for kind of 30 minutes, and then you can drink it. Now this is kind of getting into extreme circumstances now. It's very unlikely you need to use this. I think I've used these once or twice in many years, but on a hot day when you do run out of water, being able to get more is actually a good thing. I learnt the hard way to carry this. Climbed up, which mountain was it? I forgot the name of the mountain, but it was a big mountain in Scotland, and we ran out of water because it was such a hot day, and there was a beautiful crystal clear a waterfall I could have filled my bottle from, and I couldn't because I didn't have any tablets. So I always carry this now. Definitely worth having. Very light, very cheap. They do expire, so you need to think about that one. This one doesn't expire till 2025, so they do last a few years. Worth having. Another item, getting onto the kind of extreme end of survival, is a lighter. Now, a lighter is a good idea if you do need to kind of create a fire for whatever reason, and it will be in very extreme circumstances you need to create a fire in the UK. One, it's illegal to do everywhere anyway, but also, usually it'd be very rare. It'd be only if you couldn't move. For example, if you were injured and you needed to either signal for help or keep warm to stop getting exposure, that you'd need this. But a lighter is a good idea, and you know what? It's so much easier to use than a ferro rod, and it's very easy to light a fire with this. Now, in conjunction with that, I actually have some hand gel. Now, hand gel we all carry anyway due to COVID, etc. So you clean your hands after you have a wee. You can just keep clean. General hygiene is good, but actually this is a really good firelighter because it's 70% alcohol, and you can get alcohol stoves. So you just do a little dollop of this, touch it with the lighter, it'll burn, and it'll burn for a good couple of minutes, where easily long enough to kind of start a fire and get a fire going. So a little bit of hand gel, really good idea, and combined with a lighter, that's a really good fire starting kit as well as a hygiene kit. So worth having. Okay, again on the extreme end of survival, I've got a signal mirror because I can use it to signal a helicopter or somebody else. There's a helicopter above just now. I don't know if you can hear it. So this is a really good. This is a special signal mirror. It's not just any old one. It's got a hole in the middle, and the idea is you can use that to kind of sight where you're going to reflect, and you can use it to kind of aim where the flash is going to be. So that's worth having. And again, it's very small, very light. It doesn't take up much room in your kit. I do have as well a survival blanket. Now these are just like little space blankets. Now I've used these before. I've used them a couple of times now, and they're not great. But if you're cold and wet, they will actually keep the wind off. That's kind of the main thing. They'll keep the wind off. They do say about keep the heat in. They're not insulated, these at all. They will reflect heat back. And if they're close to your skin, you've got to wear them really close to your skin for it to be much use. But they will keep the wind off and will help. So it's worth having. And again, if you do need to light a fire, you can use this to reflect the heat back towards you. Use it that way. I don't know about using it as an emergency shelter. I think it's way too small. But for the weight of it, it's worth carrying. The final thing I have in my kit, which is worth talking about, is just a little pen knife. In the UK, it's illegal to carry knives that are, I think it's over 3.5 inches, I think it is, and knives that are fixed, with a fixed blade. But a little pocket knife with a folding blade that does not lock, under 3.5 inches, is legal to carry. And it's just useful for things like cutting bits of string. If you need to sort of cut yourself out, if you've got caught in something, you can cut yourself out. It would be rare you'd need this in a survival situation, but if you need to kind of fix something or maintain something, like you need to fix a harness, you need to cut some string off to fix a harness or fix a lead, you might want it for that. Potentially you could use this if you need to kind of create something to, get some fire sticks to get going. But again, extreme circumstances, you'd need that. So that's in my little kit. Small little kit I carry every day, and I hope that is useful for you. And think about it, if you're going to go, walk and spend a lot of time in the countryside, just getting some basics together, that if you do run into problems, you've got a way of dealing with it.